Dude, I was just telling you now, I have been wanting you back on my show for quite a while. And I was just explaining to you also that the last few months, I have just been burning out. But you said now you went to Croatia with no internet.
Yeah, I kind of reached as well a tipping point, a confluence, of a few different things. And I thought I hadn't seen my parents in a few years. And, it's expensive to take the whole family to the Fourth Reich, European Union. And as well, my parents don't have internet where they are, or in some cases it's extremely slow. And so I thought, you know what? Why don't I just take 3 months off? We went over to Dalmatia on the Adriatic and tuned out for 3 months, paused my Substack subscriptions. Never do that, because what happened was I thought I'll be away for 3 months. I'll pause people's paid subscriptions for 3 months. And you know what Substack did? It ended up giving all paid subscribers 6 to 9 month free trial. So when I came back, I had to spend 2 full working days to go into Stripe and fix everything. So welcome to the technocracy. So yeah.
Well, what was it like being so disconnected?
It's wonderful, but I think for people like yourself, myself, whether we're podcasters or consumers of this content, I still couldn't get away because I had the 4G on the phone. So I'm on the island. We're at the beach every day. We're roasting lambs and pigs and eating fish and hanging out, seeing cousins I haven't seen in 15 years. I got to hang out, meet with some prominent Croatian anti-globalist intellectuals and dissidents, and interviewed a couple. But still, I'm like, I need to know what's going on. I'm checking my X feed or Telegram feed, so it's difficult. It
sucks you completely in.
But it's also the nature of the work that you and I do. It's kind of like I want to know where are we at. Is it the end times yet? Has World War III started, or have they launched the next lockdown? So
you said you recorded while you were there. How did you have some sort of?
Just in person. So I recorded. Max Egan, so it was funny. So last year I was in Acapulco at Acapulco, and my Airbnb was next to Max's house and across the street from his bar. So I met him there, just checking out Acapulco. Recorded TNT radio from there, and then the following year, here I am on the Dalmatian coast. I went to high school there in the town where my parents live, and Max, it just so happens Max happened to be there. There's some Croatians that brought him over. It was the second time they did that. They're fans of Max. They brought him over. And I met those folks, went out to their house. Because one of my listeners lives there in town. He's from Canada. And it's just funny, the odds. And so I hung out 2 days with Max and recorded a sit down with Max. And then I met a few other Croatian intellectuals. Krešimir Mišak, he's been doing a program on Croatian television for 20 years. He's interviewed 800 plus, some of the same people we've interviewed. And so I did that one in Croatian with him because he didn't want to do it in English. But anyways, yeah.
What? Why? Was he protesting the language?
No, he just wasn't as comfortable in English, and I wasn't because I'd never done it in Croatian. But it was fun. It was fun, and he's got a big following. He's been doing this for 20 years on Croatian television. So he's interviewed Ike and a whole bunch of folks. So yeah.
David Icke, you don't interview. You just say hello, and then you sit back.
There's a few guests like that, like my former professor Alfred Zayas. I just actually saw him on. It's funny. Our former employer, Mike, he's still doing the World News today, and I saw him interview Alfred and Jobst Landgrib, who I also just interviewed. And
he was on my show too.
There's a few guests who just. It's like you're trying to interject, but.
And then you feel like you're interrupting.
And then they kind of get angry. Like I was in the flow,
Croatia, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't that where Game of Thrones was filmed?
Yes, Dubrovnik, and I don't know what other parts. I was in Split as well, which you've got Diocletian's Palace, so I'm sure they filmed there as well, yeah.
It looks beautiful. Absolutely stunning.
It is. I hope to return permanently someday, so we'll see. We'll see how that works out. Yeah.
Hang on. Return permanently. So you live in Mexico, don't you?
Yeah.
Why would you want to go back to Croatia?
Why not? It's Croatia.
Oh, well, that's good enough, I suppose. But
Yeah.
on your way, you need to stop by and come stay with me.
Or yeah, either way, or I can make it to Croatia and then drop down to South Africa and come back up. Yeah.
It's so far. When I traveled to China recently, you forget sometimes, Hrvoje, how massive the world is. You know, like just to get to Shanghai, you know, it took like a 6-hour flight to Ethiopia, and then from Ethiopia to Shanghai, which was 11 hours. So the whole, you know, flight, if you add the two together, was 17 hours. It's just a lot of time above the clouds.
It took me about 24 hours
To get to Croatia?
From Mexico through the USSA, through the new European Soviet to get to Croatia. And this is why I don't like traveling. I was just offered a teaching job in China at, I guess, one of the top international schools. I was offered a job in Baku, Azerbaijan. I was looking at a teaching gig in Alaska because I like going to these remote places. But for now, I think I'm just going to stay home. And I just don't like traveling anymore. And this is why I prefer, if I go somewhere, I prefer to go like 3 months or something like that. But I do have to say, I was expecting so many contingencies because I was reading, I passed through my hometown, Chicago, and a few months before that, there was some YouTuber who'd been held up for hours by the authorities in Chicago, you know, thought crime. And then in the EU, you constantly hear of journalists, particularly in the UK, but it's also happening in Germany, elsewhere. You know, podcasters, journalists being interrogated for hours as terrorists. And so I'm thinking like, this might happen to me. And then, no, it was actually one of the smoothest travels ever when it came to passport control, flying. It was actually comfortable. And, you know, one of the reasons the whole passport control is getting smoother is the facial recognition.
Yeah.
And as I like to use one of my past guest, Edwin Black's terms, the algorithm ghetto. So they just snap your picture. They know who you are. Okay, pass on through. So
I must say, I do appreciate getting through an airport quicker. But now I'm going to get shot down for saying that. I'm not saying I'm okay with facial recognition, but man, being in an airport really, really kills you, man.
Oh yeah, it's expensive. And it's just it's not fun. It's like they're little prisons. They're training us for the future purpose.
Well, I mean, I think airports are probably one of the best examples of a technocratic future. They use all the latest,
and they don't. Many places they don't take cash. When I was I was shocked when I was in Texas. I mean, Texas of all places, the Lone Star State. You know, supposed to represent freedom. It was 2 years ago. I was in Texas twice, and I was shocked. Like in the airport, I wanted to buy a burger, lunch, something. Nowhere accepted cash. And I'm like, what? It's just mind-boggling. Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can pretty much not get anywhere in China without using Alipay or WeChat. I mean, that's it. There's pretty much no cash. I didn't see any cash at all. I don't even know what Chinese currency looks like.
You know, you're reminding me. I was in China 21 years ago, and I spent 3 weeks there. We went on a historical tour because I was a history major, and our Jewish, really great guy, Jewish history teacher from Bronx who married a Chinese, and he was fluent in Mandarin. And we did a deep tour on China. We went to Beijing, Shanghai, Xi'an. I don't even remember where else. And, you know, we saw the Great Wall. We saw the Great Wall in the desert part of China, which I didn't even know existed. And so, yeah, and I think I still have some physical pay. Back then, yeah, there was no digital stuff. It was cash. But now it's how things change in 20 years.
You were there 21 years ago. So in Chinese time, that's 5 centuries.
What do you mean?
Because they work in like 5 to 10 year blocks. They are so advanced. And that is impressive, but it's also scary. I wouldn't want to live there, that's for sure.
Why wouldn't you want to live there?
For a host of reasons. I guess the most obvious is language and culture. That is first and foremost. It's not home. I can't relate. I can only relate to my African brethren. It's what I know. And I'm a foreigner there. I'm not a local. But beyond that, Hrvoje, they are very technocratic, and in many ways, they set the example for where technology and central governance, collide. And I'm not a fan of that. Intrinsically, inherently, it doesn't make me comfortable. It's largely everything I speak out against.
No, I think, I've also had Chinese coworkers here in Mexico where I used to teach. And what I gather is that they're, as you say, they're very practical, pragmatic. I don't know if you could even say opportunist, but in the sense that, and I think part of it is the spiritual aspect. You've had the atheist communism for so long. Not to say everyone is atheist in China, but again, it's a bigger trend. And so they value more materialism, right? As a result, communism was there's no God, material, money, benefit. And so that's kind of in their society, in the upper hierarchy versus the Christianized West. And so that's why, and in many senses, I feel like China has been an experiment. I've had some guests on. I'm thinking of like a Peruvian research professor, Miklos Lukas, and others, where we've talked about how, you had China opened up, U.S., Nixon and all that, when they went into China to sort of open it up. And effectively, they brought technocracy to China. So, a lot of people today point at China, and I always make the statement, we've interviewed some of the same people that live in, I've interviewed Nick Stankovic, Serbian guy in China, Jeff, I'm forgetting his name, Jeff Gray. I think he's an Englishman in China. And, I've noticed one thing with them too, bless those guys. I like them. We agree on some things, disagree on some things, but some of these people that support this statism, basically, that you're referring to of the Chinese, they're statists, even some of these foreigners. So they I'm not a statist. And so I view any state, virtually all politicians from Mexico to US to Canada to Europe to Croatia to Russia to China, any politician as bad, and the state as inherently evil, because I think all, the biblical worldview, all men are sinful and inherently evil. And so they defend some of the bad aspects of China because they're statists. So they say, this sort of, let's say algorithm ghetto or social credit thing in China, it's good because it keeps us safe. But then I'm thinking, I interviewed, I forget his name, Eric Young. He's a guy in Hong Kong, and he admitted to me, he's like, yeah, you're right. Like, you're right. We're giving one thing up for another, and right now it's peaceful and it maintains. But you're right. Maybe later it'll be turnkey tyranny, as Edward Snowden called it. So some of them admit it, that they're making a Faustian bargain. But my point was that I think from the West, technocracy that was brought into China. Microsoft came in the 1990s to China, setting up AI centers and all that. And it was one of many laboratories, like Gaza is today, like China. And now that stuff some of that stuff that's been worked out in the East is coming back to the rest of us. They call it Chinification. But at the same time, that stuff it's been worked on in the West, that's being implemented here as well. So, yeah.
You make a very good point, actually, now that I think about it. Because whenever we talk about China, we always talk about how advanced the country is. And when we talk about advanced, we're always referring to technology. It's as though that is the selling point.
Yeah, as we were discussing earlier, I wouldn't be opposed to living in China from the civilization perspective. Like if it was more analog, like back in the day, I wouldn't mind living in a rural area. But again, I've lived in half a dozen countries, and I've just gotten tired of all the paperwork and the visas and the this and that, and so I just like to stay at home. But anyways, today technology is our god. I've got a guest I'm interviewing today, Shannon Rowan, and her book is on technology, and she begs the question of whether all this stuff that we're using now is inherently evil. The technology, like all the smartphones and the DARPA internet and everything. And I think there might be something to it. And so I think we look at it through that lens today, because this is the transhumanist future that we're sold. That technology is this god. We're creating this god of AI and smartphones and everything, interconnectivity, internet of things, internet of bodies, and this is the utopian progressive future. This is the pinnacle, right? And so this is why I think everyone uses that measurement.
I don't know if this will show up on the screen, but I took this photograph. I don't know if you can see, but it says there, automated people mover. Yeah. So that was in the airport. That's a train. Now, somebody pointed out that kind of makes people out to be like cattle. I don't know if that's a language thing. I'm not sure. I've got no idea. But an automated people mover for a train.
I mean, that's great in one sense, because I think that better captures. Literal. But I think it better captures the essence of what that actually is versus
a train.
Yeah.
Well, it's automated in the sense. I mean, I went on it, and it has nobody driving it. It's completely automated, and it moves people. So I guess it's very literal, but you get that sort of cattle vibe.
That's where I think again we're headed, and it removes sort of our sovereignty. I was this week. Lutz. Okay, so here's a point that's relevant. Lutz's Trust. I talk about them a lot. Alice Bailey Theosophy. So you had Blavatsky in the 1800s, who was a theosophist. If you ask me, Satan is Luciferian. She had a Lucifer magazine, and they tout that Lucifer is the Christ. He's the good guy, right? He's the Prometheus. And Bailey founded Lucifer Publishing, which later changed the name to Lutz's Trust. And I was at one of their meetings in Geneva back in 2009. They have their headquarters in London, New York, and Geneva. In their latest newsletter, they talk about the convergence of East and West. And they talk about how we must, they were lauding Xi Jinping and his reforms and his new proposals for world government. So Xi Jinping, Global Governance Initiative. So he's proposing world government. It's like, wait, guys, this is not the direction we want to be going in. And Lutz's Trust was saying, I forget what exactly, but that we need to get rid of individuality and bring in collectivism globally. And that is like, no, we don't want to. And, G. Edward Griffin, for the longest time, has been specifically talking about how it's a war. The globalists want to bring in collectivism to extinguish individualism. So, yeah.
I've got his book here somewhere. How old is he? He must be like 90 odd.
Ooh, probably getting to mid-90s, yeah.
He's still around. You know that I've never had him on my show. I must actually try if he still does.
I've heard in this later age, it's getting difficult. You can imagine, but yeah, I mean, hung out.
Have you seen Noam Chomsky? I mean, he's like 190 and he's still doing interviews. But he's like,
really,
but he looks like one of those characters from Pirates of the Caribbean. He's like falling over, and I don't know. You don't know what he's saying.
Have you had him on?
Yeah. No. I've tried.
I know our mutual friend Hugo Kruger has interviewed him. So
yes, he interviewed him a few years ago. I don't know how he got that right because he doesn't answer emails.
I think with folks like that, it gets a bit difficult when they get to that old age, and as you say, sometimes you can't hear them well, and you can't make sense. So yeah.
G. Edward Griffin had one of the best interviews ever. Remember that one in, I think it was 1984, ironically, with KGB
Yuri,
operative. Yes,
forget
Bezmenov.
his last name now. Yeah, Bezmenov. Yeah.
What a great interview that was.
Yeah, I don't know if I told this on my last podcast with you, but 2011, Ed Griffin took me to lunch because I'd been volunteering on his in 2008-9. He had a newsletter. I think back then it was called Unfiltered News, and he was supposed to be writing a book that never came to be. And he looked for volunteers to help manage the weekly news. And then I was going to California in 2011, and then I told his assistant, "Hey, let's go meet for coffee." And she's like, "Oh, Ed wants to take you to lunch as a thanks." And so, and then I got the copy of right behind me. I think it's right there. He sent it to me for one Christmas signed. So, yeah.
Since we're on that, who have been some of your favorite guests? I mean, you've also done a huge amount of interviews.
I never sit, I don't sit down and think who's my favorite. I just in general love, like you and I do, just being able to turn on the computer and just speak to people from all around the world, from all statuses. Some of our guests are rich and famous, and others are people you've never heard of. And I just think, again, it's the content of their character, the insights that they have. But I have to look at my own website to answer that. But, you've had some of the big names. Francis Boyle was fun. He just passed on January. That was weird because he passed on, that was one of my claims to fame, the interviews that went viral that got me in trouble and eventually probably deplatformed from Patreon and PayPal.
With Francis Boyle?
Yeah, that was 300,000 views on YouTube in January 30th, 2020.
What was it about?
Got taken, COVID, of course.
No, but why that one in particular?
I don't know, because he had come out saying it was, biological warfare weapon, that the WHO knew what it was, knew about all of this corruption, was covering it up. It would be used as a pretext to bring in a global police state, which it did. And, but he passed on 5 years to the day of the release of that podcast on January 30th of this year, which I thought was weird. And, I think 74 years. And we subsequently talked about, World War III and all that, because he was an expert in international affairs as well. And so that was fun with Boyle, and some of the big names like Robert Epstein, he tacitly admits that the Google Pentagon probably took out his wife, who died in a mysterious car crash. And I really like my chat with Edwin Black because it's my favorite topic, the algorithm ghetto. And CJ Hopkins is always fun. So, those are some of the...
Is CJ still doing interviews, though? Or is he still fighting with the German government?
No, you haven't paid attention. So he's doing a road trip around America right now. And it's funny because he's going through America. And he's everywhere he goes, he's hanging out with Americans who follow him, and he's writing a book in the process. And he passed through Chicago, 15 minutes from where I used to live, so it's kind of funny. But yeah. So he's passing through, and he said he hadn't been back to America in 20 years. So yeah.
No, well, I didn't know that. I haven't been keeping up.
I keep tabs on everyone. I keep tabs on all of you, just because I like to see I like to know what's going on, the lay of the land, my past and future potential guests. So yeah.
Well, you said earlier that you don't like the state anywhere, and one of the great things about living on the African continent is we have exactly that. That's why if you live in Africa or South Africa more specifically, you by default are extremely suspicious of the state. And also, generally speaking, the state's pretty inept and useless. And that's a great thing if you believe in sort of self-reliance and independence and freedom of expression and freedom of other things. By the way, I want to ask you about that term freedom in a moment. I think it's become a bit of a catchphrase. But there's a vast polar opposite between China and just pick an African state, in terms of centralization and governance. I think that's why I think that if you want to buffer against Agenda 2030, New World Order, Build Back Better, all those terms that kind of mean the same thing, I think African countries, sub-Saharan particularly, generally are a good choice. And perhaps where you are also, I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm thinking of an interview I did with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts during COVID, and he was saying, he's like, there's nowhere to go. And he was mentioning a friend of his that went out to live in Africa. I forget where, I think a bit north of you, but that was the freest place you can get during COVID. And Mexico, to an extent, can be like that, even if you go to rural Croatia as well, which, like I said, I kind of feel, for myself, I don't feel like moving anywhere where I'm not a citizen anymore. So it's basically, I'm relegated to Mexico, Croatia, or U.S. And here's a case in point. Riley Wagaman. I think you've interviewed him, no?
Riley, yes, I think so, years ago. Actually, now you've actually put him back on my radar.
Right. And so his partner, Katarina, I think, was just kicked out of Russia. And
what?
So he too. So I guess I didn't know the full history, but he wrote about this a few weeks ago that I guess she's from America like him, but she went when she was young to Russia, fluent in Russian, a good model, citizen, and not a citizen, but good model. She was getting offered jobs in prominent Russian institutions or whatever. And the KGB, FSB, the FSB she arrived to Russia and they rescinded her visa and kicked her out of Russia. And then I guess that by default meant Riley as well. And they're in Egypt now. And I've been saying for a long time, because of this algorithm ghetto, the biometric exit entry systems that are coming in, the thought crime that is being installed in every country, that, in Mexico, they're saying, if you criticize the government, they want to be able to revoke your visa. And so this is one reason I don't like to be somewhere where I'm not a citizen. But to your other point of places like Africa, that's true here in Mexico, but I just see them accelerating this digital agenda everywhere. And they're leapfrogging. People think in the developed world, it's not as developed Mexico or Africa, but it doesn't need to be, because with this new technology, it's like everyone's got a smartphone. Everyone's got a bank account or bank app, some fintech. Those are the key nodes. And now digital identity. I mean, here's a story from last week at my church. Like I almost fell off my chair. So I was talking to a family from our church, and they have a teenage daughter. And they live here where I am on the edge of town. And they're on the lower socioeconomic rung. And the girl's telling me that she was at some mall and they were scanning people's eyes. And I'm like, wait, what? I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, is this what I think it is? It can't be. It was World Coin. Sam Altman's World Coin, which has been rebranded World with the orb. And so they were in the mall and she passes by and they have the biometric scanner and they're offering money. So they said, here's 20, we'll give you $20, which is a lot of money in Mexican terms. And just scan your eyes. We'll take your biometrics and you create your digital wallet, world wallet. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like it's happening, and this is why they go to the global south, because the people are just lining up, free money. It's like, give us your eyeballs for the world, the digital ID. And I was explaining to them, and they were afterwards, the girl and her, the girl was like, oh my goodness, what did I do? So.
But I definitely think that some places are going to buffer a bit harder than others. I mean, I don't know if you've been to Amsterdam, but that's a 15-minute city that kind of just made itself.
Yeah, I mean, I live, technically, my city, Guadalajara, is a 15-minute city. It's a resilient city. I discovered this 5 years ago. So I live in a resilient city. They've said they want to remake Mexico City, which is massive, I guess, into Hunger Game districts, because you can't make Mexico City, 25 million people, into a 15-minute city. It's like 3 hours or who knows how long to cross the city. But they announced in the mainstream paper last year They want to make it into a 15-minute city. So I guess divided into 15-minute city districts. And they announced another state, Sonora in Mexico, that they're going to make the capital, Hermosillo, a 15-minute city. They signed a deal with, I guess, Chinese Foxconn to help them make it a smart city and then make the rest of the cities in Sonora 15-minute cities. But I think, as you say, they will advance at different speeds in the implementation of this stuff. And I think, as a rule, in general, whichever country you're in, the more rural you are, the more freedom you'll have. So,
well, you see, this is the conundrum, Hrvoje. I mean, everybody knows South Africa is very dangerous. We have very high crime, and there's a sense of freedom in the chaos, and you have to pick your battles here. If you're okay with more chaos, which comes as a result of broken infrastructure, but if you are looking for, I guess, a sense of freedom, you have more of that in this mess. Whereas if you're in Canada or New Zealand or even, China, you have a huge amount of order, safety, but with a lot of top-down control.
Yeah, and you made me immediately think of the situation here in Mexico. So, for example, we've got the cartels, right? And it's not a nice situation. People, you can follow the blog Del Narco on Telegram and X, and, every day, women, children, teachers, politicians, they just killed a lime grower in Michoacan. Like a dude who was just growing limes. He was the leader, and he refused to pay extortion. They took him out. Another guy whose video went viral, a young, successful entrepreneur who spent 4 years, blood, sweat, and tears, building a successful restaurant business. And he did a 10-minute video saying, "Sorry, guys, I have to shut down my business. They're extorting me. I'm afraid they're going to send a sicario and assassinate me." And he's like, the government knows. They're complicit. They don't care. And I know this is happening to many of you other Mexican businessmen. And he what he says, like, if more people had the courage to speak out and make noise, if there was sufficient critical mass, same thing with COVID or whatever, the government would be forced to react. They'd be forced to tell the cartels, either go after them and say, "Guys, come on, you've crossed the line. Let these people do business." And so the situation in Mexico is like, you can't go too rural either. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable. I've been looking at a Plan B location in Mexico, and I feel like you say, if you go too rural in Mexico, there's no authority there. So you can have a gang of men come to your house and just do whatever they want. And that's why I'm relegated to like the outskirts of town. So you can't go, so you can still be on the outskirts of town, not too far from quote order, and still have like a well with water and your own food and animals. So kind of in between. And so as you say, you have to make a deal.
But home is where the heart is, and so
also,
my default configuration is probably fairly anarchist, but that's also as a result of living on the African continent. Perhaps I would have a different view if I grew up in Shanghai. I don't know, but what I do know is I prefer what I know, and I prefer what I am surrounded with, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah, you were having a chat with Nick Hudson the other day, and I'm a fan of his, and I know he follows me on X, and I just haven't gotten around to asking him on. But you guys, but you guys were talking about something related to, I forget what it was, China, and why they're so, I think it was suspicious or something like that, and that made me think of, I think a lot of a lot of that stuff comes from the previous regimes that they lived under. So, I've lived in Kazakhstan, I've been to Russia, and one thing you notice, there's a commonality to like China, Kazakhstan, Russia in those regards, and it's the totalitarianism. And that they've lived through Soviet Union, Chinese history, Kazakhstan was Soviet Union, and I'd lived in Mongolia as well, which was less to that extent. They were satellites of Soviet Union, but, my landlord in Kazakhstan, great guy, but when I would veer too much into politics, he actually told me, "Stop talking about politics." Like he was still afraid of because you know it's an authoritarian light state, Kazakhstan. Again, it's kind of to your point. It's still a nice place to live. I find it interesting, and the people are nice, but it's authoritarian light. And the people had this attitude when COVID came along that they were like, "Yes, we know it's all a sham, but shut up, keep your head down, and just move forward." So they've been trained through that previous history of don't make noise, don't rebel, conform. And it's almost like the individuality was sucked out of them.
But the COVID era, you know, is sort of a litmus test. You know, so if you lived in a country where you had to get a PCR test, like in China, well, that's a deal breaker for me. Right, like done deal.
I mean, to your point, so there is a website that I use to gauge international teaching appointments. It's called International Schools Review, I think, and you have to pay $30 to get access, and it's got forums of international schools around the world. And it's people who work or used to work there that give the real reviews of what it's like to work. Like, do they pay? What do they pay? Do they really pay it out? How are the students' administration and everything? And, you know, I had got an potential offer to teach in China. And I thought, okay, I'm going to check out some of those schools. And they were like the top international schools. Well, I came across one foreign teacher's review of China. So she said, pre-COVID, working and teaching in China, great, no problems. But she then explained, so this is like a real, you know, you pay access. These are real teachers, not some, you know, propaganda. And so she said what happened to her in 2022 during COVID as a teacher, foreign teacher. She said that she got locked into her apartment. Like she couldn't leave. And, you guys, you talk with Nick and others. Yeah, some of those stories were propaganda that came out, but some of it is not. So here's a real foreign teacher saying, I'm locked into my apartment. I can't buy food. Like, what is this? Like, this starvation. And then so she said, post-COVID, I wouldn't go teach in China. And that's kind of like for me where I'm, you know, whether it's Croatia or the place that I know, Mexico, it's not that bad to that extent. And I'm more familiar with their surroundings here, which allow me to sort of maybe skirt some things. But yeah,
I mean, I didn't get a PCR test at all. I've never gotten one. Yeah, and I didn't even get a fake vaccine passport because I didn't want to legitimize the system. So, but I mean, I was able to do that here, you know, in South Africa. I don't think I would have been able to do that in Shanghai. Speaking of which, I did ask some people in China about the lockdowns, and there was a girl who said that she was locked into her apartment block. They couldn't leave. They had food brought there, but that was only for 2 weeks, I think it was. It wasn't like for 6 months, or you know, and there was no starvation. But it is true. But this is also part of the information war, Hrvoje. Like how you filter, you know, the truth that's infused with nonsense. It's so difficult. It's so difficult. And the segue here is, I said earlier I was going to ask you about the word freedom. One of the things that bugs me are these sort of self-designed movements, quote unquote, the freedom health movement or the freedom movement or whatever it might be. Okay, and I don't attach myself to any of those movements because I don't really know what they mean. But when people talk about freedom, it's like a catchphrase now. You know, you might as well put a little TM next to it. Like, what does it actually mean? What do people mean when they talk about freedom?
That's a good question. I don't know. You know, and
you're supposed to know.
I think I think it can also go to an extreme as well. I mean, look at the West. You know, and I've vaguely touched on some of these topics when you explore these ideas of I know the Russians have commented on this, like this liberalism of the West, which at the start it seems okay, right? Like the American Revolution and all that, and the freedom and liberty, right? But then, you know, there's a few great folks who have been trying to explore this, but then you come to realize, a lot of those ideas were started by these Freemasons, occultists, these ideas of liberty, this God of liberty today. And I think there's something to this. You know, I was born in America. I got Thomas Jefferson right behind me, all that jazz. But then you realize, wait a minute. I think the underlying philosophy, though, is anti-Christian and anti-human, because what it means, it's Satan. You know, Satan was in the king's court, right? God's court, and he was he was a beautiful musician, narcissist. So he wanted to be God. He wanted to lead the first color revolution, the first regime change, the first coup d'etat in heaven, and he was kicked out. But the liberalism, and I think that's why I say these Freemasons are occultists and probably theosophists. When they say that means there's no limit to freedom. So I think the result of us having now men who want to be women and trans and this and that, I think that's actually a natural consequence of this philosophy of freedom, where there's no limit. So you can be what you want. You can do what you want. You know, Aleister Crowley says, right? What does he say? I forget the quote now. The whole of I forget it now. But anyways,
but you're touching on what I'm alluding to, and that is this idea of freedom A being a catchphrase, but B, nobody really knowing what they mean when they say it. Because if you talk about freedom politically, you probably are speaking about anarchism, which means no state at all, and everything is locally driven. But most people I've spoken to who would argue for freedom would not go down that road. You know, they talk about a good government, you know, that maintains the country's sovereignty, for example. But you can't have that if you are living in an anarchy. You know what I mean? And so that's politically speaking. Culturally speaking, I don't know what it means either to have maximum freedom. I don't know what that means.
Well, I mean, like some of our fellow podcasters are anarchist voluntarists, right? And that can never be applied. I'm like, look, okay, there's no government in Mexico. Yes, there is. The cartels, which they chop off your heads. It's like they dissolve your, they extort you. So it's kind of like you're not going to have anarchy. There's always going to be someone to fill that power vacuum. So for me, it's like a pipe dream. It's never going to happen. And again, I come from
it
the
never
biblical
has happened
worldview.
either, by the way.
Yeah, and then from the biblical worldview, it says, you know, government is not. The idea of a government isn't bad. Obviously, I don't like it. And I think even in the Bible, you can read that early on, God was like, you know, to the Israelites, just follow us. You don't need a government. But the people like, we want a government. It's like, okay. And so.
Yeah, but what about that verse? What about that verse that says, give unto Caesar that which is Caesar's and give unto God that which is God's?
Right. So that's a whole other philosophy. So like we're living in this age of governments. And the point of that was Jesus saying, look, the most important thing is your salvation, eternity, not now. And so to espouse this Christian morale of loving your enemy, preaching the gospel, be the best citizen that you can be, and be the most innocent, righteous, truthful, honest type of person. So I think that's what he meant. So that when you get persecuted by this tyrannical government, that they have nothing bad to say about you. Like, oh, look, he's paying his taxes. He doesn't curse. He helps his neighbors. So you're being like an example. And then the government's like, well, what are we going to get this guy on? Like, you know, and so I think that was the point. And so I forget what we were talking about, the freedom and social as well. Like if you go live in those like Kazakhstan and Russia, socially conservative, they'll never let fly this trans LGBT plus Q stuff, you know, so.
But I mean, I saw none of that when I was in China. Like absolutely none of it. No purple hair, no green hair, no low cut tops on women, like very conservative. And
that's an example,
and a strong sense of family and community. And that's why when you go to China, you end up with multiple philosophical tugs of war. What's the plural? Tugs of war,
I guess.
But you end up with many of those. You're sitting on that flight home thinking, I don't know which way to go with this.
Well, I mean, there's no perfect location. Wherever you go, in China, you get a plus, you get a minus. You come to Mexico, plus, a minus. You go to US. So it's really subjective. And, people sometimes tell me, you should leave Mexico and come here where I am, or this or that. And I'm just like, it's up to the individual. There's just so many factors.
But I mean, again, you can't see what's in front of me, but I've got my windows open and it's beautiful. I have mountains and vineyards, and it's all green, and the sky's blue, no chemtrails, and it feels and smells healthy and wholesome. So am I okay then with the chaos? I think I am.
No, that's a great place to be. That's an ideal. And I was shocked this summer at like the chemtrails in Croatia. Like it was so in your face that like you couldn't deny that those were actual chemtrails. And so I thought a place like the Adriatic, where it's mostly nature, they're geoengineering us. So yeah.
But you want to go there?
Well, it's home. It's my homeland. So what can I say?
What is somebody from Croatia called? A Croat? Croat?
Yeah, Croat. Yeah.
Okay, a Croat. Is Croatia part of the EU?
Unfortunately, yes. 2013, I believe we were assimilated by the Borg, and 3 years ago we lost our currency. So now, and this was, I was there 3 years ago in 2022 for 3 months while we still had the currency, and I came back in September, and then December was the last month before, they introduced the euro in, I think, January 2023. And so this was my first trip where I came in where it was all euro. And honestly, I felt like almost I was on another planet and that aliens took over. I mean, it's really something when you come to your country and you don't have a currency. It's like you don't have a country anymore. And it was just...
To be fair, many African countries also don't have currencies. But for very different reasons.
Well, but that's even better. If you don't have a currency at all, that's fine. But if now we have to use a euro, it's like that's another,
but just quickly going back to the question I was asking about freedom. I mean, I was reminded of those freedom events in Washington or wherever they were, where they had a lot of bands playing and people speaking on stage. And then I think to myself, what is it that they're actually wanting? A lot of them are MAGA and Trump supporters, and they see Trump as fighting for freedom. But dude, he's part of the system. He's part of the machine. he introduced warp speed and Stargate.
Yeah, I've become disillusioned with a lot of those events and organizations, and I don't like to be part of generally any association, but it's some of them are well-meaning people, no problem with them. Some are grifters, obviously, and the whole Trump thing. Yeah, Trump is. I've been saying this since I guess the beginning. Trump is New World Order. He's globalist. He's bringing in. Installing the New World Order. And there's no other way. I mean, who else, when you talk about this, I'm not saying he's the Antichrist, but when you talk about this idea of the Antichrist and the installation of the New World Order, it's going to come through somebody who appears to be, it's not going to come through some left-wing, radical, pink-haired, nose-ringed, a woke person. Everyone's going to be like, what is this? It's going to be someone who's wearing a suit, who pretends to be Christian, and that's the guy who's going to sneak in right through the front door holding a Bible as Trump does. And it reminds me of Gary Oldman in the Book of Eli with Denzel Washington. He's the guy who wants to I love it. He wants to get his hand on the Bible so he can control the town. So, yeah.
I mean, Trump, this is the thing that has blown my mind immensely, is that when he came in for the second term, when he was, shall we say, selected for the second term, how millions of people were just beautifully and poetically brought back into the system.
But it happens everywhere. Like I had the same situation here in Mexico where some of my Mexican friends, some of them who are even Christian, who are not supposed to be left wing, and I criticized Morena, the left wing party, Scheinbaum, who just proposed, one of their politicians proposed a bill to, if you meme a politician, you can get 6 years in jail. And I posted that and I said, alert, alert, they're trying to do this. And for me, it's not about left or right. Like the right-wing government tried to do this 10 years ago. Now the left-wing government is doing it. And my left-wing friends got angry because they believe in their left-wing party. They think that's their team. And I'm thinking like, Morena, that left wing, they don't know who you are. They don't care about you. And it's the same thing with the Trump stuff. It's just people, it's part of his cope. They need to believe in something, some hero. And if they don't have it somewhere else, like mine's is Jesus. And so it's, I've seen you comment on that before, the black pill stuff. And it's like, I'm black pilled, but I'm not. Yes, I'm black pilled in the near term, but my white pill is Jesus. If you don't like that, don't, you've got your own white pill. So.
Yeah, look, Hrvoje, that black pill comment is very multi-layered. This is one of the things that I have been trying to get across on my show lately, is the complexities that are around us. I think it's Kid Knightley who really drove this point home when he said that people, even on our side, get caught up in these fake binaries, these false dichotomies where it's 1 or 0, and they completely ignore all of that gray that's between the black and the white. We are a very, very big world, and there is a lot of complexity and a lot of nuance. So like a black pill, there's not like a one sentence definition, but it generally means, when I speak about it, is the dangers of being jaded or nihilistic. If you wake up in the morning and you have no desire to get out of bed, and you feel like you have no purpose, something is wrong. Very, very wrong. It's a bad place to be. That leads to taking antidepressants, and basically you become reliant on the system, and you might not even, live. You might decide to try and take your own life. That is a very dark place to be. And it's easy to fall into that trap when you see what's going on around you. And so when I speak about the black pill, I speak about that. It's not really going, oh, well, there's no point. Because there's always a point. You've pointed out that, you should always fight the good fight. And you can win little battles along the way, and those can lead to great things. And the white pill then, by extension, is merely taking that information and waking up with a purpose, getting out of bed, and still being able to smile and, I don't know, bring coffee to your wife, and make bacon and eggs and feel like you can still get through the day. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I'm referring to black pill as some commentators on the different platforms who tell me, oh, you're always so negative. You're looking at this bad stuff, and to your like you say, I get up, I'm happy, the sun is shining, I fire up the coffee, I'm like, what's going on in the world? And I have a balance. I go out into nature, play with with my kids and all that sort of stuff. And I think it's the problem is some of these people who misdiagnose. It's like, look, I can stare into the abyss daily. It doesn't really get to me. And I've been lately saying that resistance is not futile. I said in a recent interview that just if something is wrong, like the digital ID stuff or whatever, whatever the outcome, even if we're surrounded, if it's like the movie 300, if we're going to die, it's still kind of a white pill to resist. You resist not because knowing whether you're going to win or lose, because it's the right thing to do. You don't comply with evil. You fight it. And, that's another version of the white pill, I think.
The great thing about the pill analogy, though, is that it simplifies some of these complex or abstract ideas. And I'm very grateful to that wonderful 90s documentary, The Matrix. What a disaster did the Matrix become the directors? Hey,
I never even got around to watching the third sequel. And
it was a waste of time.
And but it just seems across the board that they've just destroyed all culture.
It was such a good movie, that first one. It was breakthrough, I thought.
But it's across the board. I was a huge fan of Mission Impossible, even though it was before my time. Even as a kid, the TV show I'm talking about, the original Mission Impossible. And then when the first one came out, that was like the only movie that I went twice to the movie theater to watch. I think it was in the early 90s, the original Mission Impossible, with director Brian De Palma, which had this ambiance, it had the ambiance, if you remember the first Mission Impossible, of like a real spy movie. And then the rest were just garbage, like fast food type, so they do it with everything. They destroy. That's the liberal globalist world order.
I still do enjoy movies, and I don't subscribe to that idea that I'm just going to throw out the TV, because I think there are still good movies that get made. And there are good messages that come through some of them. I thought Lord of the Rings was great, for example.
Yeah, I was watching Narnia with my kids. Yeah. To your point, you're right, and I do also watch stuff selectively, but sometimes their stuff as well. It's entertaining, but they're programming us like John Cusack.
Did you know there was a movie that came out in 2012 called Contagion? Did you know about this movie?
I know of it. I haven't seen it, but I went back a few years ago and watched Utopia with John Cusack, which was filmed in 2018-19 and released in 2020 during COVID, where they basically said, we're going to fake a pandemic just so people can get injected with a sterilant.
No ways. What's it called?
So in your face, Utopia. So it was first a British TV show in 2013, and then it was remade as an American version. And it's literally, that's literally what they effectively did. And they said that they created this image of a pandemic where his company secretly, they hired different vans and they went around the US and they sprayed some sort of concoction to get people ill, to create the appearance of a pandemic so that they would demand the vaccine. And he was saying, he had this famous quip in this TV show, like, you have to earn, summoning Bernard Shaw, you must earn your right to live daily. And so it's so, so in your
I had never heard of Contagion until I think late 2020, and someone on social media said, hey, check out this movie Contagion. And then I go and have a look, and it's a legit movie with legit actors, and it came out like almost a decade earlier, and it's about a coronavirus outbreak. And in that movie, they use the term social distancing, which is a term that I'd never heard before 2020. And everything was the same as what happened in 2020. And it's just creepy. It's just creepy, which leads me to a quick question now before we come in for a landing. How much of what's going on do you think is by design, and how much of it is by emergence?
I think it's most of it is by design. We can see, the COVID stuff that's planned, the wars, the economic aspects. They don't always go according to plan, but they just come back and retry, and they're relentless. Evil is relentless, and so. And then, as you mentioned, how is that a coincidence? Contagion and COVID, and then the 2010 Rockefeller report, and so, come on, this is all mostly planned. And then, if you take the biblical worldview, that there's someone driving this, there's this entity that's lived for millennia, Lucifer, who's the driving force. He's strategic, and he's got a plan where he wants to take us, and it's moving along swimmingly until it isn't, because he loses in the end. So
I think that's a good way to end the conversation. Hrvoje, how can my audience follow you?
Geopolitics and Empire.com. All the links are there. I'm on X, Telegram, Substack, YouTube, Odyssey, wherever you can find me.
I just want to point out that your work has been some of my favorite in the last 5 years. I think I discovered you in 2020-ish. I think it was then. I remember I did a...
Yeah, so I called you to come on my podcast 2021, and I think you came on. You probably didn't know anything of my work.
No.
And then after, I'm guessing after the fact, you looked at the archive and you're like, whoa, So
I remember, yes, I do remember, and I remember the sort of that sort of blue aesthetic that you have going, and I don't know, I just fell in love with your work. It was so good, and you've had some incredible guests, and you've had some incredible insights that have stuck with me. So from the bottom of my heart, God bless you, my friend. You have positively impacted my life. So I thank you for the great work that you've done.
Well, I've also been learning from your work as well. So yeah, thanks for.
Anyway, Hrvoje, thank you for joining me in the trenches.